So my first match was October 2nd, 1990, in Ponoka, Alberta, Canada, which is about halfway between Calgary and Edmonton. It took place in the prestigious Moose Hall. And the Moose Hall was right next to a mental institution, which pretty much is the perfect analogy for the pro wrestling business right out of the gate. And it was against Lance Storm, or as he was known at the time, Lance T. Storm, and the T stands for Thunder. So we had been working all summer long at the Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling Camp, and this was our big debut match. And we were on, I believe, first or second, and it was a 10-minute Broadway, which means 10-minute time limit. So it's interesting because I just watched it back a few months ago, right when I was putting together the complete list of Jericho, so maybe a year or so ago, whatever it was. And times have changed so much in how you put together matches. Like now, you put together a match pretty much, for the most part, from beginning to the end. And you might have some improv in there, but pretty much it's beginning, middle, end. There, all we had were two high spots that we had practiced over and over again at wrestling camp. And the rest of it was just making stuff up. And if you watch the last minute, we ran out of things to do. It was supposed to be this hot finish where it's like, okay, I'll give you a schoolboy, yeah. And then I'll roll you up, yeah. And then I'll give you a small package, yeah. What else do we know? I don't know. Give me another small package. So you watch it back, and it's just like it was just a different time. But I do remember specifically, there was probably about 80 people there in the Ponoka Moose Hall. And I used to do this thing where you'd put the guy's arm on the ground. And the big move was you would stand on your hand and put your knee up and then drop your knee into the guy's arm. So I did that to Lance, and then and then a kid in the crowd said, "Do it again." And I said, "Should I do it again?" And like 4 kids went, "Yeah!" And I was like, I'm bigger than Hulk Hogan. I couldn't believe it. They were actually reacting and all these sort of things. So we did the match and had the Broadway and came back into the dressing room, and I remember we were just flipping out. Like, we couldn't believe how amazing it was. And these people are just going crazy for us. There's 70 people from Ponoka that will never forget this night. And at the end of the night, I got my pay envelope. It said Chris Jericho, spelled Jerico. It was spelled wrong. And I opened it up, and there was a $20 bill and a $10 bill. $30 for 10 minutes work. I was like, holy shit. I make $5 an hour at the deli and work 8 hours a week and get $40. I almost made the whole thing in 10 minutes. I'm rich. And that's when I was stuck forever and hooked on the wrestling business. Thank you. And then our second match was at a kid's birthday party, and I got paid a hot dog and a glass of orange juice.
Gotta love a hot dog. So I did want to touch a little bit on Mexico, because you go to Mexico. What was that like? You know, you've wrestled in Canada, you've wrestled more locally, and then you're going into this complete unknown, complete foreign experience. How was that for you?
Well, I mean, I was really young, so I've been a full-time wrestler by design. Obviously, I've taken breaks because I wanted to, but ever since November of 1992, wrestling has been my full-time job, unless I step back, and because of Mexico. And I got there very early on, kind of in a minor league of Mexico in Monterrey, which was kind of, let's say, like a Ring of Honor or an ECW. But the big leagues were in Mexico City, and we had TV in Monterrey that the big wig in Mexico City, and Paco Alonso, someone either had told him about me or he saw me on TV and brought me up to the big leagues to hire me, which was CMLL. So it was like going to the AEW or the WWE of Mexico. So it was crazy because wrestling was huge in Mexico at that time. And what I mean by that is it had just started on TV about a year or two prior. So wrestlers, luchadors, were massive stars. You hear about Conan and Vampiro and those guys being huge names, and it's true. But right from the first week I was there, Paco gave me a push because I had long blonde hair and I was kind of a good-looking guy and could do some high spots, but I was trained well and I knew how to fit in with the guys just because when you're trained well, you can do pretty much everything if you follow along. So right out of the gate, I was a huge star. I was on the cover of like Teen Beat Mexico, like all these teen magazines, and this is not even exaggeration. Come out of the back of the arena and screaming chicks, like you see like Beatlemania, and they would all wear this really like deep, bright red lipstick, and when they kissed you, you couldn't wash the off. So you would have these lipstick tattoos for the rest of the week, and you could wipe it off, but then your face would get red from wiping it, but still wouldn't go all the way away. But it was really, really a big deal. We were doing like 10,000 people every Friday night and every Sunday in Arena Mexico. Think about that. That'd be like having 10,000 people on a Friday and a Sunday at the O2 Arena in London every single week. So it was a really big deal, and right out of the gate, it gave me a taste of true celebrity, as well as helped me learn as a wrestler because I wasn't in my own element, and lucha libre is a completely different animal. So it really did make me really good really quickly, and also gave me life experience of here's what it's like to be legit famous in this little country of Mexico.
And I mean, what was the experience like, with the language, trying to, was that difficult for you to try and not only have to deal with the wrestling part of it, that they have a different style, but also have to deal with...
Well, it's life experience. Yeah, absolutely, because, you are traveling by bus to get to the different shows, so you have to buy a bus ticket, and I always go to buy my ticket, and they would say, ¿Cómo te llamas? Like, what's your name? I'd say, Chris, Irvin, 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 Irvin. And I would just say, Jose Sanchez. Okay. And the ticket would be Jose Sanchez, and I just stuck with that. But like I said, there was a lot of you learned how to speak Spanish very quickly, because if you didn't communicate with the guys in the locker room that didn't speak Spanish. You didn't get a drink at the bar. You didn't talk to chicks if you didn't know Spanish. And because I knew Spanish, I did know how to talk to chicks, which actually almost got me murdered. Sure, I'll tell you the story, Kenny.
Please tell us the story, Chris.
So I go to this restaurant. It's called Veeps, which I thought was just a cool name, and I realized years later it's VIPs. Oh, okay. Got to get up pretty early to fool me. So I go to Veeps, and I look across the way. It's kind of like a Denny's, like a family restaurant type of a thing. Like is it Winchester's? Is it Winchester's that you guys have here? Yeah. And so I'm trying to ingratiate myself with you guys. It's like a Winchester's. Is it? No, that's not right.
No, it's Weatherspoons.
Weatherspoons,
I didn't want to correct
sorry.
you. I was like, well, I'll let it go, but then if he gets tweets about it, he'll blame me for it. So
I knew it wasn't Winchester because nobody was saying anything. I'm like, I'm getting this really wrong.
who here likes Weatherspoons?
I'm getting this really wrong. So it's like a Witherspoons here. But Winchester's is really good. It's down in Margate. You guys got to check it out. It's a great place. Great place. Great bangers and mash. So I'm looking across the table at this girl, and she's kind of looking at me. She's giving me the look, like, like, hi. And like I said, I'm Corazon de Leon was my name. Lionheart in Spanish, which is funny because you have Blue Demon and Dr. Wagner and the Mexican guys, Silver King, the Mexican guys with English names, and then you got the English guy with the Mexican name, Corazon de Leon. So anyway, she's looking at me and she's waving, so I go over there. I'm suave and debonair. I'm 22 years old, and I sit down and start using my amazing Spanish to talk to her, and she's sitting with her friend, who she says is her brother. Amazing. And then she asked me if I want to go to a party. And I'm like, of course I want to go to a party with this gorgeous woman and super famous and cool. So we get into a car, and it's her brother, is the guy that she was with. He's driving, and I'm sitting in the back with this girl. And we become fast friends and swapping spit and the whole thing, making out the back of the car. And I'm noticing, like, if you close your eyes, you can see bright lights, but now they're intermittent, they're flashing. And I look and I realize we're kind of going, like, outside of town. Like kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I'm thinking, well, like maybe it's a bush party, which you used to have in Canada. You go into the field and have like, where the is this party? Finally, after about 30 minutes, they pull over on the side of the road, And she gets out of the car, and the guy turns around and pulls a gun out into my face. Now, have you guys ever seen a James Bond movie where at the beginning they show the guy walking, it's bang, dang, ding, 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 and then and it gets red? Well, the hole that you're looking at, it has like little divots in it, ridges in it. The reason why that is that's what the inside of a barrel of a gun looks like. And I know this because I noticed that when the guy was holding a gun on me. I was like, oh, that's what the James Bond thing is. Now, when I've told this story in the past, people go, why don't you just punch him in the face? Why don't you just knock the gun out of his hand? It's like, it doesn't work that way. Like, you don't know what to do when someone pulls a gun out on you in the side of a dirt road in the middle of Mexico. And I was thinking, if this guy shoots me and my mom can't find me, my mom's going to kill me. Like, I'm in so much trouble with my mom if he kills me right now. So anyways, he's demanding my money, and what did I have? I don't know, 300 pesos, which is about $10. I give him my money, and they get in their car, and they drive away. And as they drive away, the chick is, like, laughing at me, and all I could think of was, like, I just bought her dinner at Veeps. That cost me 30 pounds, 30 pesos. So anyways, they drove away, and now I'm on the side of the road, and I have no money, and I just start walking towards the lights of Mexico City. And I'm walking, and it's walking and walking. And I remember this little scrawny dog came and walked with me for a while. He was my only friend. I gave him a name. I gave him the name of Terrence. I remember, Terrence the dog. And then Terrence just said, okay, I'm done with this guy. He off, too, and really left me by myself. And a taxi drove by, but they wouldn't pick up gringos, foreigners, because I had long blonde hair. And I basically walked for 3 hours down this dirt highway towards Mexico City until they finally picked me up in a taxi and dropped me off at the hotel I was at, where I had to go to the front desk and borrow money from the front desk guy, from the manager, to pay off the taxi cab guy. And finally, I go back, he goes, amigo, did you learn your lesson? I said, yes. He said, never take a pussy to a party in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to put that on a T-shirt and sell it to you guys. Never take a pussy to a party in the middle of nowhere. Words that you can use.
That'll be on the sale at the merch stand at the end of the show. Please pick it. So you do the Mexico run, but then in Japan, that's when it really kind of takes off for you even more, because you have that match in 1995 with Ultimo Dragon, and that ends up having big implications for you going into the US.
Yeah. So just to finish up on Mexico, there's a guy there called Negro Casas. And Negro Casas is the greatest wrestler in Mexican history. He still wrestles to this day. He's 61 years old, and he's still really good. And I learned a lot from him, because he wasn't like a luchador where you're doing high spots and flips and flying. He was just smart. He knew his audience. And I really learned a lot from Negro Casas on how to read the room, so to speak, and to learn and go with what your audience wants. And also, too, Ultimo Dragon was in Japan, and we worked a few times. And, of course, my goal was always to go work in Japan, because when I was starting, I wanted to be like, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko and Flying Scorpio and Liger and all the animals. I wanted to be an animal in Japan. So that's kind of was my goal, and then Ultimo Dragon invited me to come with him. So we worked, we were rivals, great chemistry, one of my all-time favorite opponents, and we used to do a big show 3 times a year at the Sumo Arena, Ryogoku, which holds about 10,000 people, and our company was WAR, or, as they said, it was stood for Wrestling and Romance. Not sure exactly what that means, but Wrestling and Romance was the name of the Japanese company that I worked for. So we had a great crowd at the Sumo Arena, and we had a match for the Junior Championship. And it was my first probably just great match. Like whatever a 5-star match is, this was probably the first one in front of a huge crowd. Everything went great with a great opponent. And a young Mick Foley was in the crowd watching this match, who then went back and told Paul Heyman about the match. And then Paul asked to see a tape of it, and that's basically how I got into ECW, even though it took me a year to get there, because Mick said, call Paul Heyman. So I called Paul Heyman, no answer, no answer. Finally, he answers, hello. Hey, this is Chris Jericho. I've been waiting to talk to you. I got Jimmy Snuka on the other line. I'll call you right back. I wait another month, 2 months. Jimmy Snuka talks a long time, apparently. Call back again. He answers, hello. Hey, it's Chris Jericho. Oh, Paul's not here. This is his roommate, Dave. Sounds exactly like Paul Heyman, by the way. And it's like, okay, Paul will call you back when he gets home. So anyways, it was this, Paul would just not answer the phone. He was impossible to get a hold of. And then finally he called me after a year and said, Chris Jericho, I've been trying to get a hold of you for the last year. And that's how I got into ECW. But also as well, Jimmy Hart got a copy of that match and showed it to Paul Orndorff, who showed it to Eric Bischoff, which enabled me to get into WCW indirectly. So that one match at the Sumo Arena with Dragon worked out so well that it actually got me a job in 2 separate territories. If you guys haven't seen it and you're interested in kind of my earlier days, it still holds up. It's a great match. I was 24 at the time, but I still can watch it and go, there's some potential here.
And you mentioned WCW. When you end up going to WCW, a match that feels like it's a big point in your career is the Super Brawl 8 match with Juventud Guerrera, Mask versus title. For you, because you were in WCW, you were a babyface, and then eventually you turn heel, and you have this epic match with Juvi, and he loses the mask. How important is that match to you, and how big do you think that is to your run there?
Well, Bischoff was going through this phase where he didn't want the luchadors to have masks. He didn't think the masks mattered. So if you remember, that was the time when he made, Juventud lose his mask. He made Rey Mysterio lose his mask. Like just decisions that you look back at now and go, what the f***, But I always had great chemistry with Juventud, and we always had great matches. And this was, once again, this amazing match at Super Brawl, where if he lost, he would have to take his mask off. And I built it up because he's actually a pretty good-looking guy. So I was going opposite and, telling people how ugly he was. He looks like Quasimodo. He's Quasi-Juice. He's ugly. He's hideous. I saw him with his mask off. I almost threw up. So when he did finally take his mask off, people would go, what's he talking about? He's a good-looking guy, whatever it may be. So that was kind of a big deal because taking a mask from a luchador is kind of the ultimate sign of disrespect to do that. But it's good. It was good heat for me, and that's when I started doing the collector gimmick, where I would take something from every opponent that I had, which was like Quasi-Juice's mask and Disco Inferno's headband, which was just like a string or something. Prince Nakamaki's Mahi Mahi, which is a lava lava. I couldn't pronounce anything right back then. So I would have all of these kind of collector's items that I would steal from people after I beat them. And Juventud's mask was a big deal, and it actually helped him because people could see his face now. And in Mexico, masks meant so much more than they did in the States. And the biggest thing with wrestling is seeing people's facial expressions when they're doing a match. And with Juvi's mask off, he got a lot more babyface sympathy because of that. And that's basically, I think, the indirect reason as to why Bischoff wanted him to lose the mask. But that was a really big deal. And it's funny because I remember I was doing this shtick where I would wear the belt as long as I could during a match. I've never seen anybody do that. I would wear the belt. I'm not taking this belt off. It's my belt. And then something would happen where the heel would kick me in the stomach. And you'd fall down. And then you got to take the back. So there's stuff like that I remember doing that I still haven't seen. It was just this real obnoxious over-the-top heel. And once again, just throwing darts at a board, trying anything I could to try and get over because there was so much emphasis on the NWO side of things that a guy like me could just basically do whatever he wanted, and nobody would say anything. So that's what I did, and it kind of started working.
And then, right after that, you have the series with Dean Malenko. And Dean Malenko, who maybe didn't show a lot of charisma in his face a lot of the time on screen, you kind of took advantage of that in character, and it became this kind of fun rivalry that you guys had, the uncensored match in Slamboree. And I mean, even with him in the mask and him taking it off, that feud feels like a really important one, and those matches feel like they were another building block for you to get bigger.
Well, the thing about Dean is he is very stone-faced, but he's super funny. He's the king of one-liners backstage. I remember Brian Knobbs was walking backstage with really skimpy thong underwear on, and Dean goes, "That's not a G-string, that's the whole alphabet." And then we go to a strip club, and there's a really skinny stripper. He goes, I don't know whether to tip her $1 or food stamps. Just like that, constantly throwing them at you. So, but in the ring, he was very serious. But the thing with the Malenko angle that worked is, once again, we had great chemistry, and we were just doing whatever we could to try and, keep our heads above water, because there was so much emphasis on the NWO. And I think it really helped me in my later career to know that if you got TV time, it doesn't matter how long, how short it is, winning, losing, whatever, you got to make it good. And you got to make it something that people are going to remember and be excited to see. And I always say that to people, the kid, like nowadays in AEW or something, so-and-so's angry that he has to lose a match. And it's like, I lost a match in 32 seconds to Sergeant Craig Pittman at the Superdome in New Orleans on Nitro. You think I wanted to do that? You guys even know who Sergeant Craig Pittman is? No, you don't. And I lost to him in 32 seconds in front of 40,000 people. But I had to do something to get remembered. So I remember there was a kid in the front row, and I grabbed the kid, and I held him on my shoulders and looked at the camera and smiled, and people were like, that was so cool when you held up that kid. What a great guy. And at least in this 32-second loss to Sergeant Craig Pittman, there was something positive from it. So the Malenko thing that was really cool is that Dean's wife was having a baby, so he was going to be gone for 3 months. And I was the guy that was going to put him out. And then I had to keep the angle rolling when he wasn't even on TV. How do you do that? How do you do an angle with someone that's not even there for 3 months? Well, I figured it out, and I just came up with all these different ideas. I remembered I went to a photocopy place, like a photo place, and I asked them for the biggest poster-sized Dean Malenko picture that I could get. And said, we got you covered. And I come back, and they give me this is the size of the picture. And I'm like, I need something bigger. Like, that's the biggest we got. It's not big enough. So I finally found a place that made this big, giant Dean Malenko poster. And I put it in a frame and put it on an easel. And I interviewed Dean Malenko, because the poster has as much personality as the real Dean Malenko does. So I'd be like, so Dean, what are you going to do to Chris Jericho when he comes back? Ah, exactly. And just standing there completely straight, playing it straight, and people are going, but this guy's such a I was talking about his dead father and all these other things. But the best part was, because I had no stroke in WCW, I couldn't put the easel on the production truck. I had to carry the easel with me everywhere I went. You can't check an easel at baggage claim. So I would get on the plane and, sit in the back, middle seat smoking. I have my stupid easel. Sorry, sir. And open it up and fit the easel in there. And it's like, why do you have an easel? I was like, don't worry about it. It's a long story. Show up at work with my stupid easel. But I mean, once again, if I don't bring an easel, who's going to bring an easel, right? So you got to do it, right? So anyways, that kind of was a real good test for me, because all of those Malenko matches we had were great. Like, all of them were great. But the whole angle and the whole storyline really taught me, like, you have to make the most out of it, and you got to squeeze as much as you can out of this to keep people entertained, knowing that Dean's not going to be there. And then we finally do this match against, I think it was against Hoovy for the Cruiserweight title. And the winner of a battle royal gets the shot for the Cruiserweight title, right? And I think, no, sorry, I was the Cruiserweight champion. So the winner of the battle royal gets a shot for the Cruiserweight championship against me. That's what it was. So they do the battle royal, and I'm like, my job was to announce the guys as they came to the ring. And I'm just burying everybody. Like, if you watch it back now, I'm the heel, but I'm the worst heel ever. I'm just, like, every single guy that comes down, I'm telling jokes, like Silver King with, enough frequent flyer points, he's going to become Gold King. And, the winner of the Lou Ferrigno Incredible Hulk Lookalike Contest, El Dandy, and all these different things that I was saying. And the point being was, I was trying to keep it entertaining, because these guys had nameless, faceless, no real character. And there was a guy in the company called Halloween, who was not a great wrestler. But he had a cool-looking costume with a mask. And so what we thought was, let's have Dean return, but we can't just put a masked wrestler and just call him something. The guy that we had down there was called El Grillo. which is the cricket. And where that came from is Eddie Guerrero used to call his Johnson a cricket. Why is that? Because he would take his Johnson and slap it inside of his thigh and go. So it was El Grillo. So we had some jobber guy. We got a mask costume made, and this is El Grillo. So people think, like, that's Dean Malenko. He's totally going to be El Grillo. It's like this guy. And then we had Halloween. But what we did was the swerve was that El Grillo was just somebody else got thrown out. And at the end of the match, Juventud and Halloween are the last two, and Juventud just jumps over the top to the floor. And so everyone's like, what's up with this? And I get in the ring ready for my title match, and I'm looking at the timekeeper or whatever, and now Halloween unmasks, and it's Dean Malenko, who we haven't seen for 3 months. And the crowd went bananas. I'll never forget. It was one of the loudest reactions, probably the loudest reactions Dean ever got. I'm not saying that in a cut down. People were losing their mind because they didn't see it coming. And that's the coolest part of wrestling. When you guys don't see it coming, and afterwards you go, that's so cool. We thought it was El Grillo, but it was Halloween. This is great. And then he beats me up, pins me, and wins the match, like, in 30 seconds or whatever it was. That, to me, was the best Dean Malenko-Chris Jericho match, not from a technical standpoint, but from a whole storyline and an angle. And it worked so well that it's still, to this day, one of the classic moments of my career.